if you don't keep the churn up, the machine forgets about you. And now I have to retrain the machine by releasing more material. If you want to be successful, you got to write a lot and you got to write fast. There was a brief moment where I was doing them every 4 months. And then my publisher was just like, look, we need them faster. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to 90 days.
Hello, welcome to the Thriller Pitch podcast. I apologize for not having the video on this episode. We had some connection issues, so the sound quality is not that great. The video will not be there. It's just going to be our pictures. But the insights Brian brings about the industry and his writing process and how he's accomplished so much in so many books is worth the listen.
Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
I am very excited to talk about your book, The Murder Mind, book number 11, which is very impressive.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd get this far. But yeah, it's out. It's it's there.
So let's get into the pitch. Pitch me your book, The Murder Mind.
All right. Well, The Murder Mind features my series hero, Sam Raven. He's a former spy who's involved in a personal war against predators wherever he finds them. This particular book is about a group of young terrorists who have been sitting at the feet of an old terror master and kind of taking notes, and they want to continue what he started. The twist is the mentor is not approving of this, so he would rather, after spending time in prison, et cetera, he would rather bring about change peacefully. But his students are not so inclined, and Raven and the mentor have to team up and stop them. There is a character not unlike Elon Musk who's building his own rockets and maybe using them for nefarious purposes. And it's an exciting story.
Awesome. Yes, it was. I enjoyed it. To anchor this conversation, I did read it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
So to anchor this conversation, because some of the questions I have relate to writing a series, can you give me just kind of a quick rundown of when you started writing, maybe what year it was and the books you've written? Because I was looking up your bio and you have written a lot of books. You've been working really hard.
Yeah, I think I'm finishing up my 35th book right now, which I'll be turning in a couple of weeks. But boy, I started way back in my teens. I started out drawing my own comics, and then that eventually became short stories, which eventually turned into novels. Started reading a lot in the 7th grade, which would have been 1988-ish, 87, 88. And it's all Ian Fleming's fault. I started reading the James Bond books and just got very excited for the espionage subject matter, and then just began reading everything else I could get my hands on. And I read somewhere along the way that Stephen King had signed a contract for a great deal of money to write books, and I was like, oh, you can get paid for this. And that says, well, maybe this could be a job. So that's kind of been the one constant effort in my life, is to have some sort of writing career. And so far, so good. I mean, it took a long time to get here, though, mostly because I started so young. Once I hit my 20s and I was actually writing stuff that was publishable, things picked up quite a bit. I was able to sell or place a lot of short stories, and that got me going, and I just never stopped after that.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about this book specifically. Where did this idea come from?
It came from one of those random research moments. My wife and I went to the local library, and they have a bookshop there where they sell the old books that they're trying to clear out. And I found a book called The Terror Network, written in 1980, written by a lady named Claire Sterling. And it was an overview of how the terrorist groups of the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s started operating. And it was fascinating because what you had was a bunch of fascists and communists left over from World War II that wanted to keep the fight going. And they're like, well, we're kind of old. What do we do? It's like, well, we need to hit the young people. We need to recruit them. We need to start visiting the college campuses and spreading the word about the revolution. And that's how they got their first recruits and started building their various networks. One fact of the book that was interesting, later in the 80s, we knew that the Soviets were financing a lot of the European and Middle East terrorist groups. But they didn't start out that way. It started with Cuba. So these guys went to Cuba and said, can we have some money and some training, et cetera? And Castro thought it was a great idea. He tried to get the Russians involved early on, but they're like, we're busy invading Czechoslovakia. Come back later. They weren't interested. But as Castro and several others in the Middle East mostly started building these various networks and preparing these young people for this fight, the Russians were like, hey, we should get into this. And then they kind of became the dominant force. And that's how modern terrorism began.
And how did that relate to the concept of your book? Did you just, when you read this, I imagine you read this book because you know a lot about it. Did you read it and then just drop Sam Raven into a situation to see what he would, well, I guess you open with Tracy, so not necessarily Sam Raven, but did you just drop characters into a situation to see what would happen, or did you outline it having written so many of these books?
Well, it didn't start as a story idea. I was just going to read the book and add it to the research, and I thought, I'll get something out of it. But seeing the parallels to today, where the university campus is still a breeding ground for revolutionary thought, I thought, well, this stuff applies as much as today as it did in 1980 and before. And that's what gave me the idea. Oh, that's when I thought, well, let's have a group of young terrorists who have, learned stuff from the old masters, and now they're carrying on the fight. And then, well, how Sam Raven fit into this, so I just kind of dropped him into the plot, and it just went from there.
At this point, is that how a lot of the books go in a series for you, where you have an idea and then it's kind of like, how do I get Sam Raven to mess with with these people, or mess with this situation?
I guess, I mean, I don't really think of it that way. Raven is my focus right now, so it's like everything I'm planning to write, I know ahead of time that he's going to be in it. And yeah, I guess I just get whatever the idea is. It's like, how does he fit into it? How can I realistically get him involved? That's usually the tough part, is like, what's the motivating factor for him to be on scene? So he has to, there has to be a way in for him. And once I figure that out, then it's just, the bad guys caper. What are they doing? And then how does Raven stop it? It's always easier for me, instead of starting with how does Raven stop X, it's how do the bad guys accomplish X? And then I can get Raven in to the middle of that.
Okay.
Yeah, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I always start with the caper first and then figure out how Raven gets involved.
Okay. And do you track Raven as a character from, these are the things I've done to him and that he's been through, and then in this next book I have to remember he's had this trauma, he's had these relationships, he's had this happen?
Not really. Each book is written as a standalone, so you don't have to read the whole series from the beginning. You can just pick up anywhere. So there's always usually some reference to things that have happened in the past, but nothing specific, unless I'm bringing back a character or a situation from a previous book, which I've only done a couple of times. I really try not to. Okay. Then I could tie it in that way. But when you meet Raven, you always get a background on his fight and the crusade and what he does. But each book is kind of written as if it was the first one, so you kind of meet him fresh each time.
Okay. Yeah. What kind of challenge did this story present you as a writer? If it was challenging at all.
Well, I mean, there weren't any specific challenges. It's usually figuring out the plot points and how do you get from beginning to end. That's usually the challenge. I did have to do a lot of research on the nuclear stuff that's involved in the book. several people I spoke with actually did not want me to use their name or mention them in the acknowledgments or anything. It's not that they told me anything secret. They just didn't want it known that they were talking about this. But the MacGuffin in the book, the device that everybody's chasing after in the beginning, started out as one thing. And then as I learned more about how nuclear weapons work, it became something else. And that was a tough part because my original idea for the device, when I talked to somebody about it who knew his business, was like, yeah, that's not going to work. And this is how your plot is falling apart page by page, because what you've selected here is not realistic. And it's like, okay, tell me more. So he helped me figure out a more realistic device based on his experience as a scientist. And that was a great help. And I mean, the rest of it is just, you put a lot of thought into it, a lot of trial and error. What if we did this? What if we did that? And eventually it all comes together somehow.
Yeah. At what point in the process did you reach out to an expert in the field to look at the book? And then how much rewriting did you have to do in order to accommodate, like, just what you were saying about the nuclear plot?
Very, very good question. It came about by accident. When I was writing the opening, there's always, whenever I know something is wrong, when I end up with a nagging doubt in the back of my mind where it's like, I don't know why this isn't working, but something tells me this isn't right.
Okay.
And that's when I just happened to send a note to somebody and I said, here's what I'm doing. What do you think? And then that started a phone conversation, and then he sorted me out, And then the rewriting wasn't tough. I just had to change the name of the device because it wasn't specific in the, it wasn't specific enough in the opening to require a lot of rewriting. I think I changed the name of what was in the case and a couple of paragraphs about what it does, or what it, what the device is used for, which wasn't in the opening to start with. So that really wasn't rewriting at all. I was just adding to it. And it was a very simple process to get it going. And after that, the doubt went away. And it's like I had enough information to understand what I was talking about. And it worked much better after that.
Do you feel like that nagging feeling you got after this many books is something that you've learned over this many books? Or have you had these nagging feelings in the past, in earlier books?
All the time. It doesn't happen with every book, but it's usually when I have some sort of technical thing to talk about, whether it's a weapon system or even something as simple as a city infrastructure, how the sewer system works or something like that. And I always go to, you read a lot of stuff, but sometimes it doesn't always answer the questions. And then that's when I start wondering, well, do I really have this right? And if I don't have someone to talk to, I have to read some more and look up. YouTube is great because you can find all kinds of stuff there, and people talk about it in very general terms that are easy to understand. And I mean, especially if you're not a scientist or a city engineer. And usually, if I have that nagging feeling, it just means I don't know enough and I have to go learn some more.
Okay.
And that's served me well. I mean, nobody's complained about those things. They complain about other things, but but nobody's told me I got my nuclear stuff wrong. Or there was one book I did, one of the stiletto books, that had to do with radar that could detect stealth aircraft, and which is a thing that some countries are working on. And the science behind that was pretty tricky. And I did manage to get it into some sort of understandable language that I could communicate to the reader, and then no one ever dinged me for that. So I must have done something right.
Yeah. When people put this book down, they finish the book, what are you hoping they're going to be thinking or feeling?
Just that they've read something exciting and want to read the next one. I don't set out to have any big message in each book. Each book does have a theme, something that's important to me. It doesn't necessarily matter to me if the reader gets the theme or not. If they do, great. But mostly I just want to put out something exciting, then that gets people reading something else. Hopefully something else of mine.
Have you ever been bogged down after reading all these books, like moments where you're like, I need to take a year off? Or I guess you could use the term burnout, might be the right term if you felt burnout.
For sure. My normal schedule is 90 days, for a book, and you put out enough of them at that rate that it does kind of wear you out. Murder Mind is my first new release in 2 years, mostly because I needed a break, and then also because my publisher was making some changes. And the Murder Mind and the next Raven, which is called The Dark Passage, were actually turned in almost a year ago, and then they were held back until the publisher made their new arrangement, and now they're coming out. It was not supposed to be a 2-year gap, but it turned out to be. And it was a good time to recharge and read other people's books. And going forward, I expect the level of productivity will be much higher than it has been.
What was the productivity like for this book?
Yeah, I try to do about 2,000 words a day. That doesn't always work out. The minimum is 1,000. And at that rate, I can do about a chapter a day. And I mean, it usually takes, if I'm on a 90-day schedule, it'll take maybe a month to work out the plot and the outline, and then 2 months to write it and edit it. And if there's time left over, I give it to some beta readers who check it over and look for errors and just give me some general comments. There's not a lot of time for rewriting, so it kind of has to be right the first time. And there have been some moments where, in several books, where it's like, well, I wish I had more time to do this part better or that part better. And I've just kind of learned that, good enough is good enough. And it's not the parts, it's the whole. If readers enjoy the whole book, they're not going to gripe about certain parts that might not be as good as they could have been. And that's kind of proven true. That's
a really fast turnover. Do you normally try and turn over 3 books? Is it 3 books a year, I guess? No, you could do 4 books a year.
3 to 4 actually.
Wow.
And it was great in the early days, when I was doing Stiletto in the early Ravens, because I had so much material already pre-planned. So I could just go from one to the next to the next. Once I had to, about midway through the Ravens, after maybe book 5, I would have to take time before to work out the plot and then do the writing. So that kind of cut the writing time down to 2 months and made for some pretty tight schedule issues, but man, I managed to get them done. You just got to sit down and work every day. It's really the only solution.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive. I cannot put out that kind of production.
It's tough. I would rather have a little bit longer. There was a brief moment where I was doing them every 4 months, and then my publisher was just like, look, we need them faster. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to 90 days. They even wanted to argue with 90 days. And I'm like, no, I can't do 60,000 words in less than 90 days. And there have been moments where I won't sign a new contract until I have some ideas worked out, because I don't want the stress of having to come up with new stuff when the clock is ticking. Being prepared as much as possible ahead of time has really helped out there.
When you are writing your books, do you think about the balance between geopolitical description, between character and action, and how that all plays out? One of the things I really liked about this book, which is why it sat well with me, is that I felt like the characters and the action a lot. And even though the geopolitical and all that stuff was there, it wasn't heavy-handed. And I really enjoyed that about it.
I know doing a lot of geopolitical stuff is popular now. So much of it that I don't understand, and it takes so much to read, and there's so little time to get it organized. I actually try to avoid it. And in this one, I don't remember having a lot of it. There was the Elon type character that was involved with the president, and we had a few pages of that background. But yeah, I really do try to avoid it unless I can't, and I can't think of any specific books where there was a greater amount of it. But also, the temptation is to use stuff that's actually happening right now, and then by the time the book comes out, the news is old. And so it's just, there's just so much to keep track of. Just really try to avoid it.
Okay. Well, I really enjoyed not not reading it, regardless of if it is popular. I really
Yeah,
like
okay.
this book, so it
Well,
it
thank you.
moved fast for me. Yeah.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that. Our next book is called October Blood, which starts a 3-book series with a new character. That book in particular is a little heavier on politics and stuff. But it describes a situation that has happened several times in recent years, so it's not anything that's going to be immediately outdated, but it's also, I don't think it's too heavy. I think there's a pretty good balance there where it's mostly just a support structure for the action, but we'll see what readers think.
Yeah. Is that something, I guess if it's a popular thing to do, then it's not something you're concerned about?
Well, not really, but if it's important to the story, yes, then I'll do the work and try to figure something out. But for every book, no, I don't think it's necessary. Usually when you're reading somebody else doing those things, it's a bunch of people in suits in a room talking about stuff that really isn't interesting to me. So I really try to leave that stuff out.
Yeah. Okay. What is your support network like while you're writing these books in the background to balance it all?
What do you mean by support?
If you have like someone asking you how it's going, bouncing ideas off of, if there's someone
okay.
like, a publicist or somebody how does that all look for at this point?
Well, it's mostly other writers. We'll talk shop when we're working on something or if we're having problems, we'll discuss plot points. And if I'm stuck on something, usually those conversations are enough to shake things loose. But no, mostly it's just me in a room. I got some music going and I use a typewriter, manual typewriter.
Wow.
So it's just me and me and 2 fingers.
You're following the old Stephen King method then.
Yeah. I got into typewriters a couple years ago. I inherited a few from grandparents, and I just thought I'm going to start writing books on these. And my publisher scoffed. He's like, "I'm not taking. I mean, a stack of paper, and after a manuscript is done, it's like this thick sometimes."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, we're not taking a big stack of paper from you. They got to be submitted electronically." So I look at the typewritten version as like a first draft, and then when I'm typing it into the computer, that's when I can take the time to improve a few things and make it the second draft. And it's been a pretty good process for me.
That's very cool. I didn't know anyone used a typewriter anymore.
A lot of authors do, actually. Frederick Forsyth was the one that jumps immediately to mind, and he passed away recently. Jack Higgins, another one who died a couple years ago. So there's still a few of us around.
That's awesome.
Well, you can't hack a typewriter,
That's true, yeah.
I just have to make sure the pages don't catch fire or blow away in the wind. It's not a bad process.
I imagine that's good for avoiding the social media clicking too, because I know when I'm on my computer, I could be writing and something pops into my head and then I go to look it up and then next thing you know, I'm somehow on social media.
It's a rabbit hole, yeah. I get it. Yeah, if I have to look something up, I have a computer that I can research something very quickly. But again, most of my research is done before I start, so I usually don't have to do that.
Okay. Do you set out to make your characters likable? Do you think about the process of, are people going to like this person and care about them? And the reason I ask is because when I was reading, this is not really a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter or two. I'm reading Tracy and what's happening with her, and she leads this team. And as I'm reading and she gets into some trouble, I won't spoil it, I'm thinking that I actually care about what happens to her. And in a lot of action thrillers, I'm more interested, like it's all about the action. I don't, like if the character dies at that point so early in the book, I don't necessarily care. So I actually went back and read the first couple of chapters to try and find what you did that made me actually care about her character. And there were 2 things that stuck out. And the first one was she admitted that she makes mistakes. She had an earpiece that she was thinking about, and she admitted like she makes mistakes, just not rookie mistakes. So that was one line, because that was she became then not just this, you know, team lead super spy. She became human. And then the second thing was when she mentioned how tall she was, 6 feet, and then she said, "But a lot of men don't like tall women." I don't remember exactly how you put it, but I think those two things really humanized her. And I thought it was, I had to go look it up to see, like, why did I care? What did I read? So I'm just curious, coming all the way back now full circle to the question, do you put those things in there intentionally, or does it, you're just kind of writing the scene and you just, that's what you do?
Boy, that is a good question, because I don't remember putting that much thought into it. This book is actually Tracy's second appearance. She was in book 4 called The War Business. And I had to go back to that book to remind myself how I described her. And it's okay, she's tall and yada, yada, yada. So then I thought, and then I knew a lady who was tall and was having trouble dating. So I just kind of dropped that in. And I mean, the other stuff, you just make shit up. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
But
That's fair.
Yeah. I wanted to give her some sort of a description so you could visualize her, and the lines about mistakes, I don't remember them, but I do recall something about having to learn from this instructor or that instructor about this, that, and the other. So it's again, I wrote this a year ago. So it's just me trying to build the character, and hopefully, yeah, you do like them. But I don't sit there thinking, gee, to make this person likable, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. It usually doesn't come out that way. I should take that back, because with Raven, it did. But with the other characters, not so much. I just look for one or two traits or motifs to hang on them, and then and go from there.
Okay. And I guess that just shows your skill in that you're doing it without thinking, that you're building characters.
Well,
at least I cared about
it. It's nice to hear you say that, because really, when I was learning, being able to create a character in that fashion and be able to get that reaction was the biggest challenge for me, because one of the most repeated note or lines in a rejection letter was, the characters aren't synthetic, the characters are flat, and it really took a lot of effort to get around that and learn how to put a character together. There was a writer named Michael Bracken that I will champion for the rest of my life. He bought one of my short stories for an anthology and invited me to submit more to some others that he was doing. But then he turned down every other story I sent. So finally I said to him, what worked in the first story that's not working in the second? And he says, well, the characters are flat. I said, well, here we go again. I said, okay, I get that a lot. Can you give me, what am I not doing that I should be doing that would make these characters better? And that turned into probably one of the best writing lessons I ever had, over a series of emails. And from that point forward, I've been able to look at how other authors characterize and bring their people to life, and have apparently succeeded in duplicating them.
Yeah. Because the one thing I struggle with when I read, I'm more of a psychological thriller. So character matters more for me as a reader, as far as like my first go-to. I like the action spy, but I'm usually anticipating that I'm just getting a lot of action and guns, and I'm probably not going to care. So that is why I ask, because in your book I did care. And when I do care, I always ask myself, because I write too, I ask myself, how did he do that? Because that is something that I want to make sure my readers feel as well.
Well,
so
for
thank
me,
you for sharing that
the
story.
Characters are, oh, you're very welcome. For me, the characters are more important than the action, because the action doesn't mean anything without the characters. It's a point Dashiell Hammett made long time ago, where if you just kill off a cipher, there's no emotional reaction to it. But if a character dies, then yeah, people are going to react to it. So you have to build a strong character and then put them in danger. And if you like the character and you're anxious to see what happens, you'll be more involved. But I mean, back in the old days, before I learned how to do it better, Tracy just would have been a name. There wouldn't have been much of a description. I had the idea that, oh, you'll build the description in your mind. It's like, well, the result of that was your characters are flat. And so, yeah, there was a time when that would have just been those descriptions wouldn't have been included at all, and you wouldn't have had that reaction. It just would have been the shoot 'em up stuff, and you wouldn't have cared.
Yeah. A question from JL Hancock. He's the last author that was on the show, so we have an author ask an author a question. You get to ask the next author one.
Okay.
He asks, how do you balance when you're telling a story, giving too much technology information and bogging down the story, which is kind of what I had asked you earlier.
Oh,
I don't do a good job at prefacing.
No, that's okay, because
my own questions.
No, I understand. We can riff on that. You never want to show too much research. At least I don't. I mean, some authors have a different point of view, and that's fine. But for me, when it comes to that, if something is of a technical nature, I only want to explain it so much that you can understand it, and then the rest of the time I'll just show you how it works. I'm not writing a technical manual on, sorry, Tom, submarines. You know,
Yeah.
The Hunt for Red October, for example, it worked, but it was a little too much on the technical stuff, which of course was fascinating at the time. But for me, it's just enough to get the point across and then let it go.
Yeah.
It's really
okay.
My cat's outside, so he's now roaming around. He might make a guest appearance, but yeah, just enough so the reader understands what's happening, and then show how it works. And I don't try to get bogged down too much into it. I'm really more interested in how the characters interact with it, how they feel about it. And so for me, it's keep it to a minimum and then make it understandable.
Yeah. Okay. What advice would you give to someone who just published their first or second novel?
Hang in there. Because it's a tough racket, whether you're going traditionally published or with a small press or independent. It's tough. I know with self-publishing, everybody thinks it's great. There's no more barriers. We can, no more rejections, sort of, because now your rejection is coming from readers and people who are either buying it and leaving comments or not buying it. And getting your work out there and circulate it is tough, and just hang in there. It can pay off, but you have to learn it like a business, and that's been a tough lesson. To where I spend a lot of time doing business stuff like this, and social media and running and paying for ads is almost more than I do writing, and that's what you have to do. You can't, if you just want to write stuff and put it out, and if they sell, great, and if not, then it's a fulfilling hobby. Well, then do that. But if you're trying to make some sort of a living at it, then you've got to work it like a business.
Yeah. Is that why the desire to have your publisher to have 4 books from you a year, is that come from producing books that they can continue to market?
Well, that has a lot to do with Amazon and their algorithm and how Amazon will sell stuff to people. For example, this 2-year gap has actually hurt the Murder Mind quite a bit, where sales have actually been pretty low. And then that's because if you don't keep the churn up, the machine forgets about you. And now I have to retrain the machine by releasing more material.
Okay.
So yeah, so they're like, if you want to be successful, you got to write a lot and you got to write fast. I envy the guys who can do a book a year, Brad Thor, Jack Carr, that crowd, but they've gone a different route, and this is where I'm at. So it's, but yeah, you got to learn everything you can about the publishing business and what works, what doesn't work, and there's all kinds of resources for it. And then you just got to apply yourself to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Hang in there. I like that. I like that advice a lot, because there's a lot of readers, especially book 1 and book 2, where hang in there, even for me, is really, really, I feel that advice.
Well, you can blame, who's the Game of Thrones guy?
Martin.
George Martin. Yeah. For not completing the series and making excuses about it. The unintended consequence of that is some readers will not start a series until they know there's a certain amount of books. And they want to know the series will be finished, or if it's going to be something ongoing that they can come back to often. So usually by book 3, they're willing to give somebody a chance. And then, but then you have to keep the production rate up to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
So I mean, the days of a one book bestseller, okay, if you're going trad, you might get that. If you're going through the independent route and going through Amazon or going wide with other sellers, you've really got to feed the machine.
Yeah. Where can listeners find your book, and what do you have coming up next?
Well, Amazon, of course. My publisher keeps us in the Kindle Unlimited program, so you can. It's Amazon exclusive. You can buy it or rent it through KU. We have another Raven that's actually out today, The Dark Passage, and then in the coming months, I'm not sure when yet, there'll be a 3-book series featuring a new hero named Jack Slayton, and he's a CIA guy. It's the usual nonsense, but three books there that I think are pretty good, and after that, we'll see.
And that's a 3-book series or a 3-book trilogy?
It's a 3-book series. Each book is a standalone. But there's not going to be any more after that. I think I've pretty much used that character up, and so we'll see what happens after that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go into the spoiler section of the show, which is new in season 2 of the podcast, where we are now going to talk about the end of your book. So if you are a listener and you want to read this book and do not want to know how it ends, now's the time to pause and come back later. Or of course, if you want to listen to it, you can. It will be spoiled for you. So, well, my first question, I think you answered right at the beginning when I was going to ask, was Harrington Hunt meant to be Elon Musk? Because of our current political climate and everything.
Yes, he was. Because I was looking for a big bad guy. It's like who is in charge of these young people that are doing these things, and who's paying them, and who's organizing everything. And I didn't have that right away. And at the time, I mean, my goodness, the November, the election had just happened. Elon was doing his thing. With the presidents, and everybody was upset. It's like, we didn't elect this guy. Why is he so involved? Why is he doing these things? All the controversy.
Yeah.
And then I thought, Elon builds rockets.
Yeah.
What if he gets, kicked out of Washington, but still wants some influence? What would he do? Oh, we could have the first individual nuclear power. And that's how that came about.
Yeah, cool. I love that.
It's a ridiculous concept, but I mean, because there's the nuclear scientists I spoke with, I didn't tell him that part of the idea, because the details he gave me about how nuclear parts are relegated and whatnot, there's no way that scenario could work in reality. But it's a little over the top, but I liked it too much to ignore it.
Well, hey, when I was reading it, it was close enough to reality to be very scary because of what just happened. So it doesn't seem that far. I mean, I don't know anything about nuclear anything, but I've still felt that there's this character who's trying to regain power after losing that political position or political influence. And that was, you sold me.
Well, I can guarantee that the security and regulation of nuclear components is very strict, and you can't build a bomb in your garage. It will not happen. There are some parts that are easy to get. The main parts are not, and if you are attempting to acquire them, a load of bricks is going to fall on you so fast. I'm actually quite impressed with what I've learned about nuclear security.
Okay. Well, it makes sense. You would hope, but then when you get enough money involved, you never really know.
It's not so much the money. I mean, there's a reason why we haven't had an Al Qaeda type try to set one off, because you can't stay undercover and stay in secret and try to acquire these components at the same time. It's not just one country policing this. Quite a few countries around the world are policing this to prevent exactly that. I don't want to go into too much detail. I'm not sure what I can say based on what I was told, but yeah, the security is very tight.
Okay, that's cool to know.
Mm-hmm.
So did you naturally write the knife fight into the story, or did you have to come up with it as a new way to kill the villain in the end?
That's a good question, actually. I think I was looking for a new way, because usually it's a gunfight and, a shot to the head or whatever. And I had done that actually in the previous book, Blood Mist, which was book 10. And yeah, I think I wanted to do something different. And part of that actually, as I recall now, came from a video that somebody sent me about knife fight training. And there was some ex-SEAL or whatever it was who was on YouTube and going through his routine. This is how you hold it. This is how you, all the stuff. And I remember thinking, oh, well, that's nice. Oh, I might use that somewhere. And then it just, stuff like that sits in the back of your subconscious. And then you get to that ending point and it's like, why don't we have a knife fight? Let's watch that video again and describe the motions and do something different than we did in the last book.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And my last question, in the dark tunnel, when they're in the dark tunnel, they're armed and they know, I think it was Hunt that comes on the speaker or something to say,
Right.
You're in trouble, surrender, essentially. And they choose to surrender. Was there a moment where you wrote that they didn't surrender and that they went into a gunfight? Or did you just have them choose to give up their weapons from the get-go?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay.
I probably thought about it, but based on where they were at and what they didn't know about the other side, about the opposing force, I probably would have rejected that idea very quickly, just as not being realistic. And I made the choice I did because I thought it was the best one. Also, it got them into the enemy's lair to do their thing. And yeah, I guess that's how it went. It's like I don't think I put as much thought into this stuff as you think I do.
What goes through my mind, probably from just being invested in like the whole Delta Force Navy SEAL thing, is when they talk about speed and violence of action, and when they're winning gunfights and they're in a line and they're winning the firefight and keeping the enemy head down, and that's their objective: go fast, go hard, fire lots of bullets, enemy can't fire back. And then that's usually how it goes, and that's what I was expecting. So when you decided to get to surrender, I was like, oh wow, that's very interesting, because that's not common in those kinds of situations to me. I don't read a lot of it. I've read most of it recently with the podcast.
No, I can understand, why you would say that, but I really had to get them into the lair to show the missiles and then have the final battle. And I still have, or there is still too much of a James Bond influence in my work, so there has to be that moment where the bad guy explains everything, and
yeah.
So it was like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, it was good. I liked it. And I like when things happen that I don't anticipate. That was fun. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here. If you don't mind sticking around for a little bit more, I'd like to jump into the after show rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I enjoyed this very much. So thank you for having me on.